Hi, I'm Francis Hellier, and welcome to my podcast, Metaverse. This is a podcast for the future-minded, a series for anyone on the hunt for the next big thing and all its possibilities and implications. With each episode, I will chat to those at the top of their fields, from futurists in crypto and space travel to forecasters in business and tech. Together we'll ask the question, what's next? Today I'm joined by Tom Ffiske, editor of Immersive Wire. Founded in 2016, the website aims to keep subscribers in the know about the latest developments in VR, AR, and the Metaverse. Tom is passionate about keeping a pulse on innovation and helping professionals interested in immersive tech to reach new heights, and has published a best-selling book on the sector. His latest book, The Metaverse, A Professional Guide, was also published this year. Alongside the Immersive Wire, Tom works as a full-time account director within the technology team at Three Monkeys Zeno, a leading global communications agency. Tom, it's fantastic to have you on the show, and I'm sure you need no introduction to the Metaverse.
No, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. I personally don't need introductions to the Metaverse, but hey, this is why you've got the podcast, right? To inform your audience on what's happening in the area.
Exactly. So let's start at the beginning. So first of all, when did VR, AR, and the Metaverse first pique your interest, and in what way?
When it first piqued my interest, I think it was back in 2015. I went to a meetup I'm based in London, and I went to a meetup there, and there was a little VR rig on what's called a whiz dish, which means you can run around in the while you're situated. I had a go, and I was played first-person perspective of Pac-Man trying to run away from ghosts. And I thought, wow, technology is really cool. So I was considering myself, and I was like, okay, so the technology is cool from a gaming perspective. And there's so many other people just in the same meetup who are just exploring more widely. So since 2016, I started a website, and I just followed the area. I kind of meandered here and there, wrote a couple of books. And it's interesting because my specialism has always been in immersive technologies, but that has since evolved towards the metaverse, which I see as more of like a package of what these technologies are going to be the foundation of, as it were, like relabeling a box of what a lot of people have been covering for some time.
Now, what prompted you to start that website, Immersive Wire, back in 2016? What was the sort of genesis of that idea?
I was bored. If I'm honest, I was just bored. I wanted to do something in my spare time, which was vaguely fun and productive. So I started the website. That then transitioned to a newsletter. And I find a newsletter was easier to handle time-wise because it means that, cool, Tuesday evenings, I focus on this. Saturday, I focus on this because it's sent twice a week. And so I like how the system worked. And it meant that I could just complete my activities in that way.
And you're quite prolific in terms of the content you produce. Is your underlying passion on that particular subject that drives you to create so much content for your readers and your subscribers?
I'd say there's an underlying passion. I obviously believe that technology is going to be impactful in the future. It's a question of how and when. And it's just a self-fulfilling thing where I like the ownership. I like that I've got a side project which I completely own, and it's on me to do whatever I want. So having that freedom has actually just been really nice and fun. So as a thing I do in my spare time, it's just being quite enjoyable. And I feel like a lot of your listeners who do some very similar things too, I think they appreciate the same sentiment.
I think that's right. And so let's talk about how Immersive Wire works. For the benefit of our listeners, you mentioned that might be interested in accessing your incredible content.
Yeah, so to access the content, the website's called theimmersivewire.com. So there's some articles there. But primarily, I send the content exclusively via the newsletter. So if you go on the website, you can subscribe it. And look, I appreciate it's pretty retro. It's not for everyone to get a newsletter. But I feel what I found was that there was a niche and an area where people just kind of want curated insights, which kind of just summarize what's happening and just give a little insights in it, which is why I've just transitioned to this kind of digest version of my work. So I mean, I'm exploring other options, but if you want to see the work, then you need to subscribe.
Now, can you sort of describe to our listeners the kind of content they would expect to receive if they become subscribers?
The kind of content they'll expect to see is every Wednesday is a news edition. So it's just summarizing the news of the sector, as in what's happening in VR, what's happening in AR, who said this about the metaverse, who said that about the metaverse. I stay away a little bit from NFTs predominantly, purely because there's a lot of, excuse the word, shit out there. But I do provide some sort of guidance. I also try to make it like fun to read too. I've got like my own kind of sense of humor, and I try to put it in there because not all business writing needs to be humorless. There can be an edge to it. So I tried to add that myself. And then Sundays are longer reads. So if you're just having a tea or coffee on a Sunday and you wake up, there's a longer read if you just want to absorb something longer form.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do not. I tried to make some YouTube videos and I am terrible at it. So never again.
Okay, so let's dial this back a little bit. So your interests are in AR, VR, metaverse stuff. Where do you think this whole where do you think we're going to go with the metaverse? I mean, it's a kind of esoteric, complex idea at the moment. But where do you think this is going to end up?
That's a very wide and vague a notion because the metaverse is all encompassing, quite wide.
Do you want a more specific question?
Yes, please. Because I think if we talk about where the metaverse is going to go, we'll be here for 2 hours. And I'm sure you find that enjoyable, but I don't have the time.
Okay. 10 years' time, where we're going to be?
But again, so in 10 years' time, I hope is we'll have some sort of foundational technology and there'll be some sort of underpinning aspect of what the metaverse could be built on. But actual services-wise, I really can't predict. It's really much based on what people want out of it. If people truly want to get a social aspect of the metaverse, that's what will be built towards. If people just want to play games, that's what will be built towards. If people want to visit, like, I don't know, the equivalent of like the Samsung shop in like Decentraland, I believe it's Decentraland, could be the Sandbox, then yes, then that'll be built for them too. The trouble with predicting it is that it's not even really, doesn't exist. Anyone with any intellectual honesty would be saying that the metaverse does not exist. And that we're still building it. So I feel it's very difficult to actually say what's going to look like, and even in 10 years, purely because it's like trying to predict the weather. There's a chaos effect, whereas it'll be very difficult to predict what's going to happen even a week from now.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And so if we look at the technology that exists today, what are the particular technologies you find the most interesting?
I mean, I lean towards VR and AR. Of course I do, because I like the idea of immersive tech as a whole. And it's been quite fun to get guidance on that and just to feel within the vague umbrella of immersive tech. I think within those areas, I gravitate towards marketing because I work as a PR in my spare time. So what I do, not my spare time, my full time. So what I do is I specialize in helping communicate stories for clients. So whenever we talk about the metaverse, we talk about the comms aspect. That's something I'm really personally quite passionate about. And it's just something which I delve into quite naturally.
So, Tom, your book, The Metaverse, A Professional Guide, was released just 2 weeks ago. Can you explain why you wrote the book and what listeners can learn from reading it?
Well, I don't know about you, but would you say that a lot of conversations when it comes to metaverse has been a bit cluttered? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Then
Trust me, I've had lots of cluttered conversations here on the podcast.
Oh goodness. Well, I hope that the cluttered conversations led to a thesis of sorts.
Absolutely.
But the book is all about decluttering. It's all about providing a professional overview of what's currently happening, and it's exploring all sorts of different areas. Exploring NFTs, it explores VR training, it explores art, it explores gaming, it explores Meta's role, it explores all sorts. And the guide is a way, if you're interested in the metaverse in any way, that's for you, effectively. It's quite short as well. It is like almost like a little leaf, not even a leaflet, but it's just like quite thin. So you can just flick it through while you're having a bath or something. It's very easy to read, if I do say so myself. Although other people can judge for themselves if they do read it.
So should it be fatter, that book?
I'd argue that there's more to say, but that's for another time when I have time to write my next one. With the amount of soul I put into that in January, I don't want to do it for a while, but maybe in the future. But that's not to say that that's the only place to get some good Metaverse content. Your podcast is great, for example. If you want to follow some great experts, obviously I have to cite Matthew Bull. He's releasing a book very soon, later this year. And we've also got some other great things. It was like Doug Thompson does like a great music called Out of Scope. Really recommend that. If you want to explore the safety side, like ethics and safety, look at the XR Safety Initiative and what they're working on, for example. There's all sorts of great resources out there. And this is a question of just finding them and just keeping track of what they're doing.
We're lucky we have Matthew Ball joining us on the podcast in a few weeks' time. So, yes, I look forward to that conversation.
That should be really fun.
Yeah, definitely. So, if I'm explaining to my mum what the Metaverse means, how would you describe it to my mum?
How would you describe it to your mum? So I have to think about this carefully because I want to word it in such a way that doesn't insult people's intelligence. That's why what I'm trying to do is make sure.
What are you saying about my mum?
No, it's more commentary on my own mum. Don't worry. So I would say the best way of communicating it would be, you've got the internet currently. You've got a way to access sites which you want to visit for shopping or for talking to people. But instead of clicking on a link to get information, when you click on a link, you get to experience something new. So you could search for chilling in the sun in the Bahamas. You can get information directly to your glasses on something. You could socialize virtually with an avatar. You can go to a physical library and wander around or have a tour. It would be an expansion of the internet that we have. That's how I would try to describe it to anyone's mother. But it's slightly inaccurate, but it's good enough to get a picture, if that makes any sense.
And for our younger listeners who think that the Metaverse may be their future career and they see the new potential opportunities, where are the job descriptions? What's going to happen? How do you work in the Metaverse?
Job descriptions? As in, what type of roles are we talking here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if we look at, going back to my history, we started selling tickets online back when the internet wasn't really much of a thing in the UK. And it was very hard to persuade people of the advantages of the internet. The World Wide Web was something that people thought was a criminal activity almost, Where are the opportunities for people to live and work within what we define as the Metaverse?
Get really good at building things. So get familiar with tools such as Unity or Unreal or solutions built within a Rec Room or Roblox, and get good at spatial design, be able to build experiences. It'll take time, but I guarantee you that your skill sets are currently needed. And then if you can prove your work with some sort of portfolio, you'll be able to start conversations for roles in the future.
So when I talk to my friends and family about, how I describe the Metaverse, sort of the amalgamation of the digital life with virtual life, digital life with real life, sorry. Again, what they come back to me is, well, isn't Instagram bad enough? Isn't social media bad enough? Yeah. Oh, we're going to make this even worse. Do you see there's a negative side to what we're sort of imagining and creating in terms of sort of the social media aspect?
It's a good point. I think because Meta is playing a role in it, people obviously gravitate towards the social media aspect. I do think that the same problems we're experiencing today when it comes to echo chambers will almost certainly continue into the Metaverse. And when it comes to policing of the content, it'll be really difficult the more open it is. So because that responsibility is going to be blurred. So it's an interesting discussion, and it warrants further exploration when we have a firmer view of what the Metaverse is actually going to look like. And then that conversation will warrant further discussion. Right now it's all very hypothetical, and we're just exploring early stages. And I'd be interested to see how it develops from there.
I suppose if we look, it's a really good point. I think if we look back and we say, well, let's imagine how social media would develop. It's not exactly gone in the way we were we were hoping for.
No.
The idea of
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I remember a time many years ago where we thought the internet was incredible because you can access any information you want. And I find it remarkable that today there's issues because you can access any information you want, which is incredible transition.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the real truth here is that we have with an iPhone or Android or whatever, we have in our palm of our hands access to the oracle, right? We can find any information. I mean, it's the holy grail, frankly. And instead, what we do is we reverse the camera and take pictures of ourselves, and then add whatever filters to give the impression that our lives are not necessarily what they really are. I just worry, as much as I'm obviously the name's on the tin, right? As much as I'm excited about the metaverse, we need to make sure that this is distributed. It's fair. It has people who are passionate about making sure that it's not controlled by one particular company, for example, or government. I think these are the kind of ethical questions that we need to consider before we embark on this journey.
And what I would argue is we are considering them. I mean, we're having this discussion right now on the ethics side. Ken Bai is incredible when it comes to ethical frameworks, which he sends to everyone. And we got also Kavya and the rest of the team and Marco, who are dealing with the XR Safety Initiative. We are having these discussions, and we also got these boards which are looking into it too. I think it's just a question of just ensuring that the companies building the metaverse are looped into these discussions, just so that even though we are not part of the core planning process, we can at the very least say we've done a lot of research into it. Here's our thoughts. We hope it's useful.
And do you think that people are scared of what we define as the metaverse in sort of a rational sense? Is it because they're struggling to understand this new future we envisage? And how do people like yourselves working in this space try and manage that problem?
How do we manage the problem? Just to refine it further, what's the actual problem we're trying to address here?
Well, I think it's just, I suppose it's fear of the unknown. We band about the idea of metaverse in the same way that we talked about the World Wide Web back in the day. And people were fearful of that. I mean, you can argue as well that people were, whether it's justified or not, worried about cryptocurrency and blockchain and those sort of things. So, is the onus on us as people who kind of understand the concept and understand where we're going, is the onus on us to try and properly explain the possibilities and limitations of what we're trying to achieve?
It's a great question, so I have to process this myself. I do think the onus is on everyone. It's not on individuals, first of all. It's going to be on onus on everyone to really look into it. And when it comes to worrying about, as you say, the great unknown, what's going to happen in the future, I'd argue that as it is so unknown, we need to take a responsive development cycle where we develop it and we let the past inform the future, but we're not defined by it. And whenever we make a new innovation, we just consider what the issues are and how it can be tweaked and shaped. And I do think that that's kind of, I'm sure there's a better word for it, but this kind of reactive approach would be probably the predominant way in which we're going to develop and grow. That's how. I know legal progression is slow, but that's exactly how legality works. It bears into account the bricks of what's been built on, combined with any new issues that come up along the way, and shape laws accordingly.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, in terms of sort of our daily lives, do you expect virtual reality to become more and more involved in our lives going forward? I mean, how do you? Is one of the interesting things about this podcast that we have got many people from different areas on talking about the future, and I'd love everyone to be like Mystic Meg, predicting exactly how things are going to be and telling me my lottery numbers for next Saturday. But in your vision, where we're going to be, how does virtual reality become a sort of form of reality in our lives going forward?
I do think it's going to be a steady approach. I've argued this a few times. There's a lot of evidence to show that adoption of VR headsets is based on cost. So, regardless of the quality of the headset itself, the cheaper it is, the more that people buy it, regardless of what happens. So, I do feel that VR headsets will be more and more used purely because they get cheaper. We also have to wait and see what's going to happen with the Super Bowl commercial happening in the US. I don't know when this podcast is being recorded, but in the Super Bowl weekend, which is the 12th and 13th, I believe, Meta's released an ad when it comes
you're living in an alternative reality. You just asked the question when this podcast has been recorded. I can tell you, it's today.
Okay.
It's today.
No, sorry, I meant when it's being published because it matters for what I'm about to say and the timing of it. But regardless of what Super Bowl weekend, there's a Meta ad that's released, and it just looks super weird. And I think it's so interesting when it comes to marketing. In that, of course, you need to shape it for the audience. You need to make it in such a way as to put in your messaging while also communicating what's happening. And I think it's just because I'm so involved in the space that I've got a different perspective of it compared to most other people. And I just find that element fascinating.
So do you think Mark Zuckerberg is an enemy to the metaverse?
Well, no, they're trying to build it.
But they're not trying to build it, are they? We will build the metaverse ourselves. Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook are trying to jump on that bandwagon, no?
I completely disagree. And the reason why I do is because Meta's been building it and is putting a lot of money into it and making a loss because of it within that area of Meta. So, for example, they launched a fund which is worth about $50 million, where they're investing to open standards in the metaverse to help build it and to do research into it too. So I disagree that they are hopping on the bandwagon of the metaverse. I'd argue that they were following the trends of what the metaverse is, which has been ongoing for a few years. And then they're like, okay, we want to go all in, and just did that. They've done the same with virtual reality as well. And I'd argue that the VR area would not exist today if it wouldn't be for them. And I'm not saying any of this to say I like 100% back them. The wording which I'm saying implies that I'm like, I love them. All I'm literally saying is that they are putting a lot of money behind it. And that financial backing has really helped prop everyone up as well.
When we talk about things like blockchain and metaverse and everything else, one of the key words is decentralization. It's about the fact that, for whatever reason, there are very big tech players out there, Facebook, Amazon, etc. And, one of the big pushes really is to decentralize all this space. So whilst I take your point about their investment in this space, and frankly, Mark Zuckerberg's excitement and encouragement of building the metaverse is significant and important. Do you think that kind of this is a problem in the sense that one company is trying to own the space?
I do think it's causing messaging issues where when someone talks about the metaverse, they immediately think, oh, that's what Meta's doing. That's been the general feedback of what's happened. So I think they're now inextricably intertwined with it. But I think as the conversation matures, is the right word, then there's going to be a general understanding that it's a collective effort where lots of companies are building it together. And that's when conversations will get super interesting. And I hopefully we'll get some sort of interesting penetration in the mainstream market.
Now, as we look forward with VR and AR and everything else, in terms of sort of things like filmmaking and new genres, can you imagine us experiencing things very differently to how we consume sort of art and film today?
I love it. If you go to like film festivals like Venice Film Festival, Raindance Immersive, London Film Festival, they're all doing some incredible like art pieces in virtual reality. Not to say that not as many people can access that art, but if they can, they'll see some incredible things. And I think that area I love it. Like fascinating.
Now, I guess finally, what does the future hold for you, Tom? What do you have? What do you have lined up next, and what are your big projects coming down the line?
Well, first I'm going to sleep because it's just been a very tiring few weeks of the book launch. But after I slept and I had a little simmer down, I had to think about my path forward. I do kind of want to explore more the marketing dimension of the metaverse because I think there's a lot of issues when it comes to how we communicate it. And I think looking into that a little more in depth could be interesting. And I see on your side, your plans is to keep on growing this great podcast, I assume.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that what's really exciting about this is a journey of discovery for all of us, isn't it? It's there's so much ahead of us, and I think that if anything else, I suppose the fact we've sort of on and off been locked down for the last 2 years means that there's going to be so many exciting opportunities out there. The way we engage with people, the way we talk to people, we're chatting here on Zoom to record the podcast. I couldn't even imagine this sort of 3 years ago that we'd be doing these things. So we already kind of live in a weird metaverse anyway. But yeah, let's see how this all turns out. Well, I encourage all of our listeners to get your book, The Metaverse Professional Guide. You're listening to Metaverse with me, Francis Hellier, and thank you so much to my guest, Tom Ffiske, for a great conversation. It's been really interesting. Tweet us at Metaverse Pod with any suggestions or feedback, and if you enjoyed the podcast, please do share a link on social media. You can sign up to receive an email when a new episode drops at our website, metaverse.com.